Guys like you don't get noticed here." The words landed light, almost playful, but the laughter that followed carried weight, the kind that pressed down on a man's shoulders without ever touching him. Nathan Brooks didn't look up right away. He stood near the edge of the ballroom, hands steady at his sides, the faint scent of floor polish and expensive cologne mixing in the air around him. Crystal chandeliers hummed softly above, casting clean white light across polished marble floors and tailored suits that moved like they belonged. Nathan's jacket didn't belong here, neither did his worn boots, but he didn't adjust them, he didn't apologize, he just breathed slow measure like a man who had learned long ago that dignity doesn't ask for permission. "You lost." Another voice chimed in sharper this time. A few heads turned, a few smiles widened, someone chuckled and took a sip of something sparkling. Nathan finally lifted his eyes, not defensive, not angry, just present. "No," he said quietly. "I'm exactly where I need to be." The words didn't echo, they settled, and for a brief second something in the room hesitated. Then the laughter returned, thinner, now edged with something uncertain. The music swelled again, soft piano blending into quiet conversation. Waiters passed by carrying trays of champagne glasses that clinked gently like distant bells, and still Nathan didn't move. He wasn't here for them. He was here because earlier that morning, before the sun had fully warmed the streets, he had packed his daughter's lunch, checked her homework, and promised her he'd be home before bedtime, and that promise meant more than any room like this ever could. Across the ballroom, unseen by most eyes, a woman paused. Victoria Hale, CEO of Hale Industries, stood near the center of the room, surrounded by people who leaned in when she spoke, who laughed a second too quickly, who measured their words like currency, but she wasn't looking at them, not anymore. Her attention had shifted, drawn quietly and completely to the man standing alone at the edge. She watched the way he held himself, not stiff, not proud, just steady, the way he absorbed the room, without reacting, the way he answered mockery, without raising his voice. Something about it didn't fit the pattern she was used to. Power usually announced itself loudly. Here it moved without sound. "Who is that?" someone asked beside her. She didn't answer right away. Her gaze stayed fixed as Nathan reached for a glass of water instead of champagne, as he nodded politely to a passing server, as he chose presence over performance. And in that choice, something subtle shifted like the air before a storm, not loud, not dramatic, just undeniable. And for the first time that night, Victoria Hale stopped listening to everyone else, because the only thing in the room that felt real was the man no one thought mattered. The room returned to its rhythm, but something underneath had shifted, not loudly, not visibly, just enough that a few glances lingered longer than before. Nathan stood where he was, fingers resting lightly against the cool glass of water, condensation forming slowly against his skin. He took a small sip, steady, unbothered, as if silence itself was something he understood better than most. "You always this comfortable being invisible?" a voice asked from his left, softer this time, not mocking, just curious. Nathan turned slightly. The man beside him wore a tailored navy suit, the kind that fit like it had never known struggle. Nathan gave a faint smile. "I am not invisible," he said simply. "People just decide not to look." The man blinked, caught off guard, unsure whether to laugh or nod. He chose neither and stepped away, as if something in the answer made him feel smaller, not attacked, just seen. Across the room, Victoria had not moved. Her attention remained fixed, but her expression changed. No longer detached, no longer evaluating. Something deeper, something more personal had begun to surface. She stepped away from the circle around her, ignoring the subtle shift in energy as conversations paused just long enough to notice her. Leaving one executive, cleared his throat, another adjusted his tie, but she did not stop. The sound of her heels against marble was quiet, but precise, each step deliberate, not rushed, not hesitant, as if she had already made a decision. She just had not said it out loud yet. Nathan did not notice her at first. He had turned slightly, watching a server struggle to balance a tray. Near the far wall, one glass tilted dangerously close to the edge. Nathan stepped forward, instinctively steadying the tray before anything could fall. "Got it," he said gently. The server exhaled in relief. "Thank you." "I almost lost that." Nathan nodded. "Happens more when people are watching." The server gave a small smile, then moved on, unaware that someone else had been watching the entire exchange. Victoria stopped a few feet behind him close enough now to see the small details, the worn edges of his sleeve, the careful way he moved without drawing attention, the absence of any need to impress. And for a moment, she said nothing. She simply stood there taking in something that could not be measured in titles or numbers. Nathan sensed her presence before he turned, not because she made noise, but because the air around him changed, subtle but unmistakable. He looked over his shoulder and met her gaze directly, no hesitation, no surprise, just recognition of another person standing in the same space. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice calm. Even Victoria studied him for half a second longer, as if confirming something only she could feel. "No," she said softly, then after a brief pause, "I think you already did." The words were simple, but the way she said them carried weight, not gratitude, not curiosity, something closer to respect. Nathan held her gaze, not challenging, not retreating, just present. And for the first time that night, the distance between power and humility did not feel like a wall. It felt like a question waiting to be answered. Victoria did not step away, and neither did Nathan. For a brief moment, the noise of the room seemed to drift somewhere behind them like a distant tide. Conversations continued. Glasses clinked softly, music carried on, but around them there was a different kind of quiet, not empty, not awkward, just aware. "You are not on the guest list," she said finally, her tone not accusatory, just factual. Nathan nodded once. "I figured that part out already," he replied. "Then why are you here?" she asked. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he glanced toward the far end of the room where a maintenance card had been left slightly out of place, a small detail most people would never notice. "Because something needed to be fixed," he said simply. Victoria followed his gaze and looked back at him, her expression shifting again, curiosity giving way to something closer to understanding. "And you stayed," she said. "Most people would have left after that." Nathan gave a faint shrug. "Leaving is easy. Staying is where you learn things." A small silence followed, not uncomfortable, not forced, just enough space for the words to settle. Victoria studied him more closely, now not his clothes, not his place in the room, but the way he carried himself, the absence of performance, the quiet certainty she was not used to seeing in rooms like this. "You talk like someone who has been in rooms far more difficult than this one," she said. Nathan's eyes held hers, steady, not defensive, not proud. "This room is loud," he said, "but it is not difficult." The answer lingered between them, and for a second Victoria almost smiled, but before she could respond, a voice cut in sharp and unwelcome. "There you are." A man in a dark suit approached quickly, his confidence practiced, his smile thin. "We have investors waiting, and you disappear." His eyes flicked briefly to Nathan, dismissive, then back to Victoria. "Is there a problem here?" Victoria did not look away from Nathan. "No," she said calmly, "there is not." The man hesitated, sensing something he did not understand, then gave a short laugh. "Well, if you are finished entertaining the help, we should get back." The word hung in the air, heavier than it should have been. A few nearby guests turned slightly, pretending not to listen. Nathan did not react. He did not correct him, did not step back. He simply stood there, the same as before, unchanged. The man smirked, expecting discomfort, expecting distance, expecting the usual shift in power, but it did not come. Victoria's gaze hardened, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough that the air seemed to cool. "He is not the help," she said quietly. The man blinked, surprised. "Then what is he?" he asked. Victoria paused, just for a fraction of a second, not because she did not know, but because the answer mattered, and when she spoke her voice was steady, clear. "He is someone you did not take the time to understand." The man scoffed lightly, trying to recover. "With respect, we do not have time to understand everyone in the room." Nathan finally spoke, not to challenge, not to defend, just to place something true into the space. "You always have time," he said calmly. "You just choose where to spend it." The man opened his mouth to respond, but stopped. Something in Nathan's tone made it difficult to push back, not force, not authority, just certainty. And for the first time that night, the balance in the room shifted again, quieter, deeper, no longer about who belonged, but about who actually saw what mattered. The man in the dark suit forced a laugh and stepped back, but the confidence he carried moments ago had already cracked at the edges. He adjusted his cufflinks, glanced around, and walked away as if nothing had happened, yet the space he left behind felt Different, quieter, more aware Nathan did not follow him with his eyes. He did not need to. Instead, he returned his attention to the room, the same calm posture, the same steady breath, as if the moment had passed through him without leaving a mark. Victoria remained where she was, her gaze still on him, but now there was no distance left between observation and decision. "You do not react the way people expect," she said. Nathan gave a small nod. "Expectations are usually about them, not me." The answer came without hesitation, without effort, like something he had said before, or maybe something he had lived long enough to understand. Victoria took a step closer, now close enough that the background noise softened into a blur. "Most people in this room spend their entire lives trying to be seen," she said, "and you seem perfectly fine not being noticed at all." Nathan looked at her, not dismissing, not agreeing, just present. "Being seen is not the same as being known," he replied. "I am not interested in the first one if it costs me the second." The words landed quietly, but they carried something heavier than the music, than the conversations, and the weight of the entire room. Victoria inhaled slowly, not because she was surprised, but because something in her recognized the truth of it, a truth she had spent years moving around without fully naming. A nearby group of guests glanced over again, their whispers softer, now not mocking, not dismissive, just curious. The shift was happening. Slowly, but it was happening all the same. Nathan noticed none of it, or perhaps he noticed and chose not to respond. The difference was impossible to tell. "What do you do, Nathan Brooks?" Victoria asked, his name spoken clearly for the first time, not as a label, not as a category, but as a person. Nathan did not seem surprised that she knew it. "I fix things," he said simply. Victoria tilted her head slightly. "That is a broad answer." He allowed a faint smile to appear, just for a moment. "So are most problems." The corner of her mouth moved, almost a smile, but not quite. Something restrained, something thoughtful. She studied him again, the way he did not fill silence, the way he did not reach for attention, the way he let moments exist without forcing them to become something else. And for the first time in a long time, she felt the absence of pressure, no expectations, no performance, just presence. Then the music shifted, the tempo slowed, the lights dimmed, slightly signaling the next part of the evening, a presentation, perhaps a speech, the kind of moment where attention returned to the center, where roles were reinforced, and hierarchy restored. Victoria glanced briefly toward the stage, then back at Nathan, as if measuring something invisible, something internal. "They are about to remind everyone who matters in this room," she said quietly. Nathan followed her gaze for a second, then returned to her. "They can try," he replied, calm, unchanged. Victoria held his eyes for a fraction longer, and in that silence, something settled, not decided, not declared, but understood that whatever was about to happen next would not follow the rules. The room had been built on the lights, dimmed just enough to guide attention toward the stage, a soft spotlight forming at the center. As conversations quieted, not completely, but enough to signal that something important was about to be said, people adjusted their posture, straightened jackets, lifted glasses halfway, then paused, as if even their movements needed to match the room's expectations. Victoria turned slightly, her expression composed again, but not the same as before. Something beneath it had changed, something quieter, more deliberate. "I am expected up there," she said. Nathan nodded once. "Then you should go," he replied. Simple, without hesitation, without attachment. She studied him for a moment longer, as if waiting for something else, a question, a reaction, an attempt to hold her there. But none came. He did not reach, he did not ask. He simply remained where he was, grounded in a way that made everything else feel temporary. Victoria gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, then stepped away, her heels carrying her back into the center of the room, where attention naturally followed. The host took the microphone, voice polished, practiced. "Ladies and gentlemen, if we could have your attention, please." The room responded immediately. Conversations faded, bodies turned, faces lifted toward the stage, the invisible structure of hierarchy settling back into place. Victoria stepped into the light, her presence commanding, without effort, the kind of authority built over years, decisions, risks, victories, losses, all of it. Standing quietly behind her, she took the microphone, and for a brief second, she did not speak. She let the silence settle, not forced, not awkward, just enough to reset the room. "Tonight is about vision," she began, her voice clear, steady. It is about recognizing what truly builds something that lasts. The audience listened, nodding, some already preparing to agree before she finished a sentence, but Victoria's eyes moved, scanning the room, not stopping on the usual faces nod. Lingering on the expected until they found him again, Nathan still standing near the edge, exactly where he had been, not hidden, not highlighted, just present. Something shifted again, subtle, but real. She continued, "We talk a lot about growth numbers, expansion," she said, "but we rarely talk about what holds everything together when no one is watching." A few heads tilted slightly, the tone of her speech, not following the usual pattern, not purely business, not entirely predictable. Nathan did not react. He simply listened the same way he had listened to everything else, without interruption, without assumption. Victoria's grip on the microphone softened just slightly. "Character does not announce itself," she said. "It does not compete for attention. It does not need permission to exist." The room grew quieter, now not out of politeness, but because something in her words asked for it. She paused again. This time her gaze did not move, it stayed fixed. Sometimes the strongest presence in a room is the one that never tries to take it. A ripple moved through the audience, subtle, almost invisible, but felt. Nathan's posture did not change, but something about the way the room related to him did not. The space around him no longer dismissed him, it recognized him, even if it did not fully understand why. Victoria lowered the microphone, just slightly, her voice softer now, but somehow carrying further than before. "And sometimes," she said, "the person everyone overlooks is the only one who actually sees what matters." The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of something unspoken, something waiting, and for the first time that night the room was no longer certain who it was supposed to be looking at. The silence did not break right away. It lingered, stretched across the room, like something fragile no one wanted to disturb. A few guests shifted in place, unsure whether to applaud or remain still. The usual rhythm of these events had been interrupted, and no one had rehearsed what came next. Victoria lowered the microphone slowly, her eyes never leaving the far edge of the room where Nathan stood, unchanged, untouched by the weight of attention that had quietly moved toward him. "Tonight is about recognition," she continued, her voice softer now, but more precise. "Not the kind we announce on stages, but the kind we realize too late if we are not paying attention." A murmur passed through the audience, not disagreement, not confusion, just adjustment, people recalibrating what they thought this moment was supposed to be. Victoria took a step forward into the light, then another, as if closing a distance that had never been physical to begin with. "We spend years building titles," she said. "Positions, influence, authority." She paused, letting each word settle. "And we forget that none of it matters if we cannot recognize character when it stands right in front of us." A few heads turned now, not randomly, not subtly, but with intention, following the direction of her gaze. The room began to shift, not in noise, but in focus. Nathan felt at the weight of attention moving toward him like a slow tide, but he did not step back. He did not straighten his posture. He did not prepare a response. He simply remained the same. The host near the stage hesitated, unsure whether to step in, unsure whether the script had been left behind entirely. But Victoria did not look back. She did not ask permission. She continued, "There is someone here tonight," she said, and the room held its breath, not because of the words, but because of the way she said them, calm, certain, final. "Someone who reminded me of something this room was never meant to forget." A few people exchanged glances, the earlier laughter, now distant, almost embarrassing in memory. Victoria stepped down from the stage, her heels soft against the marble, each step deliberate, each second stretching the moment further than anyone expected. The distance between her and Nathan closed slowly, not dramatically, not rushed, just inevitable. Nathan watched her approach, his expression unchanged, but his attention fully present, as if he understood that something was unfolding not for him, but around him. She stopped a few feet away, the entire room now aligned in quiet observation, no whispers, no movement, just stillness. "You said you fix things," she said, her voice carrying without effort. Nathan nodded once. "I do," he replied. "Then tell me," she asked gently but clearly, "what do you do when something is not broken, but everyone treats it like it is?" The question hung in the air, heavier than anything said before. It was not a test, not a challenge. It was an opening. Nathan took a breath, not deep, not dramatic, just enough. You do not fix it, he said calmly. You stop letting other people define it. The words landed and the room did not react right away. No laughter, no interruption, just silence, real silence, the kind that does not come from control, but from understanding. And in that moment, the balance of everything in the room shifted completely, not toward power, not toward status, but toward something far quieter, something no one there could ignore anymore. No one moved, not because they were told to stay still, but because something in the moment made movement feel unnecessary. Even the soft clink of glass had disappeared, as if the room itself understood that anything louder would break what had just been said. Victoria did not look away from Nathan, her expression no longer guarded, no longer measured. It was clear now, direct, and for the first time that evening entirely personal. Most people spend their lives trying to become something, she said, her voice steady but quieter, now not meant for the stage, but somehow reaching everyone anyway. You already are. A faint shift passed through the crowd, not in sound, but in awareness. People who had laughed earlier now stood with a different posture, shoulders slightly tighter, eyes more focused, as if they were seeing the same man for the first time and realizing they had missed something important. Nathan did not react to them. He did not turn to acknowledge the attention. He kept his eyes on Victoria, not because she was the center of the room, but because she was the only one speaking to him without expectation. You walked into this room alone, she continued, and somehow you're the only one here who did not try to belong to it. Nathan gave a small breath, almost a quiet laugh, but without humor, just recognition. Belonging is not something you ask for, he said. It is something you carry or you do not. The words settled deeper than before, not sharp, not loud, but undeniable. Victoria nodded slowly, as if confirming something she had already decided long before she spoke again. She took one more step closer, closing the final space between them, not as a CEO approaching someone beneath her, but as a person stepping into something real. The room leaned in, without realizing it, not physically, but emotionally. Every conversation paused, every distraction faded, until there was nothing left but the quiet exchange between two people who were no longer separated by anything that mattered. Victoria held his gaze steady, no hesitation, no calculation, just clarity. I've spent years building everything people in this room admire, she said, and tonight is the first time I've questioned whether any of it means what I thought it did. Nathan listened the same way he always had, present, without interruption, without trying to shape her words into something else. And what did you find? He asked softly. Victoria's answer came without delay, without uncertainty. That respect cannot be bought, she said, and it cannot be demanded. She paused just long enough for the truth to fully land. It can only be recognized. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of realization, the kind that arrives slowly and stays long after the moment. And Nathan did not step forward. He did not step back. He remained exactly where he was, grounded, unchanged. And in that stillness, something became clear to everyone watching. Power had shifted. Not through force, not through status, but through something far quieter, something no one in that room could control. Victoria's voice softened even further now, almost private, yet somehow heard by all. And I think I finally recognize it. She said. The words did not echo. They settled deep into the room, like something final, something that could not be undone. Once heard, no one spoke, no one moved. Even the soft background music seemed to fade into nothing, as if the moment demanded more than sound. Victoria stood there, her gaze steady, her posture no longer defined by power, but by choice. And in that stillness, she took one quiet breath, then said it, not loudly, not dramatically, but with a clarity that cut through everything. I do not have a husband. A ripple moved through the room, subtle but immediate. Heads turned, shoulders shifted, eyes widened just enough to register the weight of what had been said. But she did not look at them. She did not acknowledge the reaction. She kept her focus exactly where it had been all along, on Nathan. And I have spent years surrounded by people who knew how to impress me. She continued, her voice even softer now, yet somehow more powerful than before, but not one who knew how to be real without trying. Nathan did not interrupt. He did not react the way anyone expected. He simply listened the same way he had listened to everything else, without judgment, without assumption. Victoria took a small step closer, not closing distance out of impulse, but out of certainty. So, I'm going to ask you something no one in this room expects, she said. A breath passed through the crowd. Not spoken, not audible, but felt as if the entire room had leaned forward at once, waiting. Nathan's expression remained calm, but attentive, not guarded, not open, just present. Can I date you? The question landed, and for a moment, time itself seemed to hesitate. The silence that followed was not confusion. It was impact, pure and undeniable. Every eye in the room locked onto them, waiting for something, a reaction, a rejection, a shift in power. But Nathan did not rush to answer. He did not smile. He did not step forward. Instead, he let the moment breathe, let the question exist without immediately shaping it into a response. Victoria did not look away. She did not retract the question. She stood there, fully present, fully accountable for what she had said. And for the first time that night, she was not the most powerful person in the room. She was simply a woman waiting. Nathan exhaled slowly, not out of pressure, but out of clarity. His voice, when it came, was quiet, steady, unchanged. You do not know me, he said, not as a refusal, not as a challenge, just as truth. The room tightened again, not in tension, but in attention. Victoria nodded once. I know enough to ask, she replied without hesitation, without fear. The answer did not break the silence, it deepened it. And in that moment, everything that had defined the room before, titles, expectations, status, faded into something smaller, something irrelevant, because now there was only one thing left hanging in the air, not power, not wealth, not reputation, but a simple question asked without ego, and a man who would answer it on his own terms. The silence stretched longer this time, not fragile, not uncertain, but full, like something important had finally found its place. Nathan did not look at the crowd. He did not look at the stage. He kept his eyes on Victoria, not because she had asked him a question, but because she had asked it, without hiding behind anything, and that mattered more than the words themselves. He took a slow breath, steady, measured, like everything about him had been all night. You're used to people saying yes to you, he said quietly, not accusing, not challenging, just stating something true. Victoria did not flinch. She nodded once. Yes, she answered simply. The honesty did not weaken her. It made the moment stronger. Nathan considered her for a second, not judging, not weighing, just seeing her the same way she had finally seen him. Then you should know this is not about saying yes, he continued. It is about knowing why you are asking. The room remained completely still now. No shifting, no whispering, no movement, just attention. Victoria's gaze did not move. She did not rush to respond. She let the question turn inward, something unfamiliar, something she had not allowed herself to sit with before. Because I respect you, she said after a moment, her voice steady, but softer than before. Because you are not trying to be anything other than who you are, and I have spent too long around people who forgot how to do that. The answer settled, and for the first time, it was not about power, not about position. It was about something human, something simple. Nathan gave a small nod, not approval, not rejection, just acknowledgement. That is a better reason, he said calmly. A faint breath passed through the room, not relief, not disappointment, just release, as if something had been resolved even before the final answer came. Nathan shifted his weight slightly, not stepping forward, not stepping away, just grounding himself in the moment. But I have a daughter, he said, and the words carried a different kind of weight, one that did not need explanation. Everything I choose has to be something I can stand behind when she asks me why. Victoria listened without interruption, her expression unchanged, but deeper, now more present. Then answer me the way you would answer her, she said gently, not as a demand, but as an understanding. Nathan held her gaze steady, and for a brief second the entire room disappeared, not literally, but in meaning. Nothing else mattered, not the chandeliers, not the suits, not the titles, just a man and a question that deserved an honest answer. I would tell her, he said slowly, that you do not choose someone because of what they have or who they are in a room like this. He paused just enough for the truth to land fully. You choose them because they make you feel like you do, not have to be anyone else. The silence that followed was not waiting. It was recognition. Victoria's expression softened, not dramatically, not visibly to everyone, but enough that something real passed through her. And do I make you feel that way, she asked quietly. Nathan did not answer right away. He let the question exist just long enough to be respected. Not yet, he said finally, calm, steady, honest, but not closed. But you might if you were willing to step out of this room, and meet me where life actually happens." The words settled, and this time the silence that followed was complete. No tension, no expectation, just stillness. And in that stillness, something rare took shape, not a decision, not an ending, but a beginning built not on power, not on status, but on something far quieter, something real enough that for once no one in the room needed to speak at all.